long before modern Malaysia was created. The land was covered with thick jungles, mountains, rivers, and coastal villages. Thousands of years ago, early humans arrived on the Malay Peninsula and the island of Borneo. They survived by hunting animals, fishing in rivers, and trading with nearby islands. Over time, small kingdoms began to rise along the coasts. These kingdoms became rich because they controlled sea trade routes between China, India, and the Middle East. Merchants traveled across dangerous oceans carrying silk, spices, gold, and precious stones. The Malay Peninsula slowly became one of the most important trading centers in Asia. Indian traders brought Hindu and Buddhist ideas to the region. Temples were built, and local rulers adopted Indian-style titles and traditions. Ancient kingdoms, such as Lankasuka and Kedah, became famous ports. Buddhism and Hinduism influenced the culture, language, and architecture of the Malay world for centuries. The people of the region were skilled sailors. Malay ships crossed huge distances across Southeast Asia. Villages turned into powerful ports filled with traders from many lands. Arab merchants later introduced Islam, which slowly spread through the peninsula. Local rulers accepted Islam because it strengthened trade relationships with Muslim merchants. By the 13th and 14th centuries, Islam had become deeply rooted in the Malay world. Mosques replaced many older temples, and Islamic culture mixed with local traditions. This created the unique Malay-Muslim identity that still exists today. During this time, the powerful Srivijaya Empire from Sumatra controlled much of the region. Later, the Majapahit Empire from Java challenged its power. The Malay Peninsula became a battlefield for influence between regional kingdoms. But one city would soon rise above all others, Malacca. The city of Malacca was founded in the early 1400s by a prince named Parmesvara. According to legend, he saw a small mouse deer kick one of his hunting dogs into a river. He believed it was a sign that the place would become powerful. He established a kingdom there, and within years, Malacca became the greatest trading port in Southeast Asia. Ships from across the world arrived in Malacca's harbor. Chinese, Indian, Arab, Persian, and Malay merchants traded peacefully under the protection of the Sultan. The city became rich beyond imagination. Gold, spices, silk, and weapons flowed through its markets. Malacca also became a major center of Islam. Scholars and religious teachers traveled there, spreading Islamic knowledge throughout the region. The Malay language expanded as a trade language across Southeast Asia. However, the wealth of Malacca attracted dangerous enemies from Europe. New powers were searching for control over Asian trade routes. Soon, foreign ships carrying cannons would arrive on Malaysian shores, and the history of Malaysia would change forever. In the early 1500s, European powers began searching for direct access to Asia's spice trade. Among them was Portugal, a rising naval empire determined to control the rich trading routes of the East. At that time, Malacca was the greatest port in Southeast Asia. Hundreds of ships filled its harbor every year. Traders from China, India, Arabia, and Africa exchanged silk, spices, gold, and weapons there. Whoever controlled Malacca could dominate Asian trade. In 1511, Portuguese forces led by Afonso de Albuquerque attacked Malacca with powerful cannons and warships. The Sultan's army fought fiercely, but the Portuguese weapons were far more advanced. After brutal battles, Malacca fell. The Sultan escaped and later established a new kingdom in Johor. But the loss of Malacca changed the region forever. Portuguese soldiers built massive stone forts and took control of trade. Muslim merchants who once dominated the port were heavily taxed or driven away. The Portuguese rule angered many local rulers. Malay kingdoms repeatedly attacked Malacca in attempts to reclaim it, but the Portuguese defenses were strong. The city remained under European control for more than a century. Meanwhile, another European power was rising, the Netherlands. The Dutch wanted to destroy Portuguese influence in Asia and take control of the spice trade for themselves. They allied with local Malay kingdoms against the Portuguese. In 1641, after months of siege and starvation, Dutch forces captured Malacca. Portuguese power in the Malay world collapsed. However, the Dutch cared more about controlling trade than developing the region. Malacca slowly lost its former glory as trade shifted to other ports. During this period, the Malay Peninsula remained divided into many small sultanates, such as Johor, Perak, Kedah, and Selangor. Rivalries between these kingdoms often weakened the region. By the late 1700s, a new empire arrived, the United Kingdom. The British East India Company saw the Malay Peninsula as strategically important for trade between India and China. In 1786, the British acquired Penang from the Sultan of Kedah. Later, they established Singapore in 1819 under Sir Stamford Raffles. Singapore quickly became one of the busiest ports in the world. British influence spread rapidly across the Malay Peninsula. Tin mining and rubber plantations brought huge profits. Chinese and Indian workers were brought in large numbers to work in mines and plantations. The British eventually controlled most of Malaya either directly or through agreements with local sultans. Railways, roads, and modern cities were built, but much of the wealth flowed back to Britain. The population of Malaya became highly diverse. Malays, Chinese, Indians, and indigenous communities lived together, each playing different economic roles. This diversity would later shape the future of modern Malaysia. But while the British Empire appeared strong, a new world war was approaching. Soon, another Asian power would invade Malaya and shatter European dominance forever. By the early 1900s, British-controlled Malaya had become one of the richest colonies in Asia. Huge rubber plantations and tin mines generated enormous wealth for the United Kingdom. Cities such as Kuala Lumpur and Singapore grew rapidly, filled with traders, workers, and colonial officials. But beneath the surface, tensions were rising across Asia. In the 1930s, Japan was expanding its empire aggressively. Japanese leaders believed they should dominate Asia and remove European colonial powers from the region. As World War II spread across the globe, Malaya became a major target because of its valuable resources. On December 8, 1941, Japanese forces invaded Malaya only hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor. British commanders believed the dense jungles of Malaya were impossible for an army to cross quickly. They were terribly wrong. Japanese soldiers moved rapidly through jungles using bicycles and light equipment. British defenses collapsed one after another. Fear spread across the peninsula as Japanese aircraft bombed towns, roads, and military bases. The British Army, once seen as unbeatable, suffered humiliating defeats. Thousands of soldiers retreated south towards Singapore, believing the island fortress could survive. But in February 1942, Singapore fell to Japan after a short but devastating battle. It became one of the greatest defeats in British military history. Tens of thousands of British, Indian, and Australian troops surrendered. For the people of Malaya, the Japanese occupation was harsh and terrifying. Food shortages became severe. Many civilians suffered from hunger and disease. Japanese military police brutally punished anyone suspected of resisting their rule. Entire communities lived in fear. The Chinese population suffered especially badly because Japan was already fighting China during the war. Many Chinese civilians were executed or tortured under suspicion of supporting anti-Japanese movements. Resistance groups soon formed in the jungles. One of the strongest was the Malayan People's Anti-Japanese Army, which fought guerrilla warfare against Japanese forces. Some local Malays also joined resistance efforts, while others cooperated with the Japanese administration. The occupation shattered the myth that European colonial powers were invincible. For the first time, many people in Malaya realized the British could be defeated. When Japan surrendered in 1945 after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, British forces returned to Malaya. But the world had changed forever. Nationalist movements were now growing stronger. Malays, Chinese, and Indians increasingly demanded independence and self-rule. At the same time, communist groups that had fought the Japanese became powerful and armed. Violence and political conflict spread across Malaya. The British struggled to maintain control as calls for freedom grew louder. The road toward independence had begun. After World War II, the return of the United Kingdom to Malaya did not bring peace. Instead, it marked the beginning of a powerful struggle for independence. People from different communities, Malays, Chinese, and Indians began demanding self-rule after years of colonial control and wartime suffering. The British tried to reorganize the region by forming the Malayan Union in 1946. This plan aimed to centralize administration and reduce the power of the Malay rulers. However, it faced strong opposition, especially from Malay groups who feared losing their political rights and cultural identity. Due to widespread protests, the Malayan Union was replaced in 1948 by the Federation of Malaya. This system restored the authority of the Malay sultans while still keeping British oversight. Although it was an improvement, it was clear that independence movements were gaining momentum. At the same time, a serious conflict began in the jungles, the Malayan Emergency, 1948 to 1960. It started when the Malayan Communist Party launched an armed rebellion against British rule, aiming to establish a communist state. The British declared a national emergency and sent military forces to fight the guerrillas. Villages were relocated into new villages to cut off support for communist fighters. Jungle warfare became intense, with both sides suffering heavy losses. During this period, Britain also began preparing Malaya for independence by training local leaders in governance and administration. Political parties formed, including the United Malays National Organization UMNO, which became a key force in the independence movement. Leaders from different ethnic groups began cooperating to negotiate independence peacefully. One of the most important figures was Tunku Abdul Rahman, who united various communities under a shared goal of freedom. While fighting continued in the jungles, negotiations in the cities were moving forward. The British realized that maintaining control was becoming impossible in the long term, especially with rising global pressure for decolonization. By the mid-1950s, agreements were made to gradually transfer power to local leaders. Elections were introduced, and Malayan political institutions began to take shape. Finally, in 1957, a historic moment arrived. The Federation of Malaya achieved full independence from Britain. A new nation was born, but its journey was not over. The next challenge would be uniting different territories and creating a stronger country. After gaining independence in 1957, the Federation of Malaya began building a new nation under the leadership of United Kingdom, had left behind a complex society made up of Malays, Chinese, Indians, and indigenous groups. The main challenge was to create unity among these diverse communities while maintaining peace and stability. Malaya's first Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman, believed that a larger federation would be stronger economically and politically. He proposed the idea of merging Malaya with several neighboring territories, including Singapore, Sabah, Sarawak, and Brunei. In 1963, this vision became reality with the formation of Malaysia. The new country was created on September 16, 1963. However, not all regions remained part of the federation for long. Brunei decided not to join, and in 1965, Singapore separated from Malaysia to become an independent country. This was a major turning point, as it reshaped the political and economic structure of the new nation. Even after formation, Malaysia faced serious internal and external challenges. One major conflict was the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation, 1963 to 1966, where Indonesia opposed the creation of Malaysia. Skirmishes and military tensions occurred along borders in Borneo, but the conflict eventually ended with diplomatic agreements. Inside Malaysia, ethnic tensions also became a concern. Differences in economic opportunities between communities created social imbalance. This tension eventually led to the tragic race riots of May 13, 1969, in Kuala Lumpur, one of the darkest moments in the country's early history. After the riots, the government introduced new policies to promote unity and reduce economic inequality. The new economic policy, NEP, was launched to improve education, employment, and business opportunities for all ethnic groups. Despite difficulties, Malaysia continued to develop rapidly. Infrastructure expanded, industries grew, and the country became an important exporter of rubber, tin, and palm oil. Cities like Kuala Lumpur began transforming into modern urban centers. By the late 20th century, Malaysia was on its way to becoming one of Southeast Asia's emerging economies. But the story of modern Malaysia was just beginning. From the late 20th century onward, Malaysia entered a new phase of rapid modernization and economic transformation. The country shifted from an agriculture-based economy to an industrial and manufacturing powerhouse in Southeast Asia. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, Malaysia introduced long-term development plans like Vision 2020, which aimed to make Malaysia a fully developed nation. Major infrastructure projects were launched, including highways, airports, and the expansion of urban centers. Kuala Lumpur became a symbol of modern Malaysia, especially with the construction of the iconic Petronas Twin Towers, once the tallest buildings in the world. These developments showed Malaysia's ambition to compete on the global stage. The country attracted large amounts of foreign investment, especially in electronics, automotive parts, and oil and gas industries. Companies from Japan, the United States, and other nations established factories in Malaysia, creating millions of jobs. At the same time, Malaysia worked to maintain political stability in a diverse society. While challenges such as economic inequality and political debates continued, the nation generally remained peaceful compared to many other developing countries. Education and technology also improved rapidly. Universities expanded, internet access grew, and Malaysia became more connected to the global economy. Tourism also became an important industry, with visitors attracted to beaches, islands, rainforests, and cultural heritage sites. In recent years, Malaysia has focused on becoming a high-tech and knowledge-based economy. Industries like digital technology, green energy, and advanced manufacturing are growing quickly. Today, Malaysia stands as a modern, multicultural nation with a unique history shaped by ancient trade kingdoms, colonial rule, war, independence, and rapid development. Its journey from Malacca's golden age to a modern global economy reflects centuries of change and resilience.
Enjoyed the video? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing stories and videos every day. Your support keeps the channel alive and motivates us to create even better content.